Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres with Henry and Irene.
Hi,
Boy,
Blanche.
boy, an earthquake, an avalanche.
Yeah, really.
What are we doing here today, Irene?
Well, we're taking a look at a video I made the other morning. It was our first day that was only going to be 80 degrees. And my goal that day was to get as many of the vegetables out of the fridge as possible because both my crisper drawers were full and a bunch of the shelves were full. So I was processing. I was freezing things and I was making stuff.
You know, we've done a bunch of series on how to can and how to freeze things. There's other ways of preserving food too. One of them is making bread and bread-like products.
Right, and we've been experimenting with zucchini bread this year. We never really made much zucchini bread when the kids were little. We just ate it all. We always had hungry children around. Now that there's just two of us and we actually wound up with too much zucchini this year, I was like, well, a lot of people talk about preserving zucchini for the year by making bread with it, or muffins, or whatever they particularly care for. And we've been working on our zucchini recipe. We've got a decent recipe, but we're trying to fine tune it. So this is version 2.
We'll put the recipe in the show notes, so if you're interested in trying what we're doing here, you can go ahead and look at that. This bread that Irene's busy making, the previous version turned out a lot like a B&M Boston brown bread. It was pretty good, but it had a really strong raisin flavor.
You wanted less raisins. So what we did decide we needed to double the nuts. So we doubled the nuts, and that's right. But I'm thinking there still needs to be something changed in there, and I may actually break down and buy the stuff that they're telling me to buy. We got it from the King Arthur Flour website, and they're encouraging you to use one of their products, of course, which is a boiled cider where they take, I don't know, I think they said a cup of cider turns into a tablespoon. So it's a very strong cider flavor that you use as a flavoring,
Now, you saw Irene start off using our stand mixer to process this zucchini.
Right.
We have a stand mixer that we've had for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And we have a series of attachments, one of which is a grater.
Right.
You can use a food processor. You can hand grate it if you want. That's an awful lot of work.
Well, normally I don't use that processor thing at all. I mean, when you make coleslaw, you don't use that. You just use a knife. By the time you get the stuff out and get it dirty and then wash it, you could have it chopped, the stuff cleaned up and all ready to go if you're just making coleslaw. But because I was doing so much, I said I don't want to be sitting there grating forever and ever. So that to me is the advantage of having machinery.
Now, there's one thing Irene's going to use here that we have that is really, really convenient, and that is a 4 small loaf pan that holds the dough that you would put into a single loaf. That means that we can cook a small amount times 4, and we don't have to eat the whole thing, and we don't have to freeze the whole thing.
Right.
What we actually do is we'll freeze it in the freezer, pull it out, and then we'll vacuum seal it.
Right. Otherwise, you smush it when you vacuum seal it.
Irene's toasting the nuts right now. It makes a big difference in how those nuts taste.
Well, it was interesting because I don't think I'd ever seen a recipe before that said toast the nuts when you're going to bake it afterwards. But it makes a huge difference in the flavor of the omelet. It gives a much more nuttier roasted flavor to them. It's just really, it brings it out a lot. I really like that. That's a great idea that they give you in that recipe. Checking the recipe to make sure I don't forget anything.
Follow the recipe.
Well, there's, I had 45 things going on in the kitchen at once, too.
Now, what Irene was doing on this day is, if you watched yesterday's episode, she was processing a lot of different vegetable types all at one time. One of the reasons why we use a stand mixer is because that allows us to do something else while the mixer's doing its thing. Whether it's mixing up a batter or grinding up some zucchini, doesn't matter. It does it by itself.
Well, it's like I can be making bagels, for instance, which need to be kneaded for a while. And it's one of the only things I actually need in the mixer because that needs to be needed for quite a while. And I just let it run.
So what's about to happen right now is she's going to be putting that batter into the 4 tins of the 4-tin bread pan.
Yeah, I love that thing. It's fun. It's you know, it was always handy, but now that there's just 2 of us at home, it's super handy because we don't, although we would love to sit down and eat an entire loaf of bread, it's really not a great idea.
We don't need it for sure.
We don't need it. So the point is that it lets us make these wonderful things, and actually it's our version of fast food. I was thinking about that today at lunchtime when Henry said, "What do you want to have?" And I'm like, "Why don't we have a couple of hot dogs?" And I went to the freezer and pulled out 2 frozen hot dogs. That's our version of fast food. We have the stuff set up so that I can pull out just 2 hot dogs.
Oh, it looks like you're putting some sugar on top of those.
Yeah, they recommend brown sugar, and my brown sugar was too hard. Well, it took about 40 minutes, and it came out right the first time. I wasn't sure that was long enough, but it was. That's what left of it, so it couldn't be all that bad. And I'm actually kind of eyeballing that piece, thinking about it seriously. Pretty darn good. We're going to tweak it some more. We like the amount of nuts, but now we want to tweak some other stuff. So the continuing saga of getting the perfect zucchini bread.